It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of 4th of July weekend, technically July 5th, 1996, and we've got two movies to look at. One of them was not only the biggest new release of the weekend, but it was the biggest hit of the year. And a film that a lot of people seem to like. Brace yourself for my thoughts on this one. Let's start off with that film, and that is, of course, Independence Day. I mean, the marketing campaign for this movie was amazing back then. Remember, this is 1996. The marketing campaign for this movie was pretty incredible. This started off with a promotion that began with a commercial that aired during Super Bowl 30 that previous January, and from that point on, that was actually that was a big deal because it later led to the trend of using Super Bowl airtime for these advertising campaigns for the potential blockbusters of the year, which we still have to this very day. And not only that, you had Fox using promotions with Apple at the time, Coca-Cola, I think Toys R Us had a big campaign with them. Most Coors had a big campaign with them. There was just so many it was just a big marketing campaign, and that really led to the film's success because everybody saw this and was just like, man, like it's like they're hyping this up to be the next big thing. I mean, Fox went all in on the promotion on this. They even had a special that aired, which was basically a fake news report about the events that happened in the film. And Roger Ebert himself said that led to the film's success because of those trailers and the marketing campaigns. And it was considered a brilliant move. That was what Roland Emmerich did for a lot of his movies back then. He would just hype you in with that big push on these films. But that's kind of the thing with Roland Emmerich and these movies like this, because, yeah, it's brilliant, it's a smart campaign, but Roland Emmerich is basically the equivalent of a snake oil salesman. He'll sell you on these he'll sell you on these big things, on movies like this, thinking it's going to be the most amazing thing you ever see, and then when you actually go to the movie, it really isn't. I mean, let me put it this way. The guy could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, and they would buy it.
Ketchup popsicle? Yeah.
You advertise it like this, you've got audiences coming in droves, and that's exactly what happened because the film started opening in theaters on July 2nd, tying in with the time the story begins, and it was a big hit over the 4th of July weekend and went on to become one of the biggest hits of all time at that point. Only the second highest grossing film at that point behind Jurassic Park. I mean, it was that big of a deal, and it was a big hit financially. Critically, not so much, but you're going to see why in just a second, because I'm about to tell you why this movie was not that good critically. And but regardless, it was a huge deal when it came out. It was a big marketing campaign that helped the film really put this film out there to become the big hit that it was. It put Roland Emmerich on the map. I mean, you got some big names in here. This was Will Smith's big breakout role. This was the film that launched him into superstardom, because the next year he'd have Men in Black come out, and then there would be there was a stretch for a long period of time that Will Smith had to have a movie open on 4th of July. It was kind of it almost was like a holiday tradition in a way to see a new Will Smith film on 4th of July, and it would usually be a big hit. But with all that said, the movie itself is not very good. I do not like this movie whatsoever. I mean, it's not a very good movie. I mean, everybody you talk to, people look at this movie and say that, oh, come on, it's just a popcorn movie. Can't you just have fun with it? You know, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's not supposed to be seen as a serious film. I mean, just go in there, turn your brain off, and have fun. Well, you know what? I think Nostalgia Critic put it best in his review. He basically said, let me tell you something. A water slide is fun. All the slipping and sliding, it's just great. But if someone took you off the water slide, shook you, gave you a nookie, and then spat in your face and put you back on the water slide, you'd be like, that wasn't fun. That was weird and annoying. And that's this movie. I mean, I literally took that from his review, but it's basically the point of it's basically what this movie is. Like, it's not really as fun as you think it is. I mean, there's nothing about this movie that constitutes as fun. Yeah, some of the visuals look pretty impressive, and there is some good practical effects used in here, but other than that, though, everything else about the movie is just so generic. It's just so uninspired on so many levels. Like, the characters in this movie are basically just stereotypes. There's no character you really can relate to in this movie because they're all characters that we've seen done over and over again. Some are is basically just, like I said, they're just stereotypes and cliches of characters we've seen in numerous films beforehand. I mean, Roland Emmerich had a period where he had a character like Jeff Goldblum in nearly every single movie he was doing at the time. Stargate, it was James Spader. Then later in Godzilla, it was Matthew Broderick. I mean, he was literally stealing from his own material here, and it was literally the same thing over and over and over again. And these are tropes that again would appear in Roland Emmerich films. Like New York had to be destroyed, Washington had to be destroyed in nearly every single one of these movies. And it's just like, dude, did something happen in those areas where you just had to just be like that? I mean, and like I said, you don't like any of these characters at all, and like the story makes no sense whatsoever. Like there's a storyline about Will Smith's character. He wants to get in on the fight. He wants to save the city, but because his girlfriend is a stripper, and that basically means that, hey, they won't let you. Sorry, you can't do that. It's just like, really. I just talked about a movie in the last episode, Striptease, where Demi Moore plays a stripper, but she was also an FBI agent. So it doesn't really. So that shouldn't really matter here, but. Nope, we got to do it here for the story, for the purpose of the story that we've seen done over and over again. It's just like, come on, man. And the stripper, actually, let me think for a second. I was thinking about something that happened in the next movie because she returns again in the next movie. But guess what? She's a scientist now. So what? Like, I mean, just so much of this movie is just insane. Like insane of how. Just so generic and so lackluster it really is. It's just like, it's amazing that they went to they didn't really do anything of noteworthiness to make this stand out as anything unique or different besides the visual effects, besides the fact that besides the storyline that they have here, besides the effects that they have in this movie that are still pretty impressive for the time. That's the one thing I'll give this movie credit for. The visuals in this movie are still pretty impressive, but other than that, though, this entire movie is just nothing but characters and cliche little characters, stereotypical characters we've seen done over and over again. A story that should be so engaging, but it's just not. Yeah, it's got good action sequences here and there, but at the same time, you don't really get fully invested in this movie. And yeah, it was a gigantic hit at the time. It was a turning point for the Hollywood blockbuster that would later be used for over 20 years later. But at the same time, it's just not an inspiring story on any level, shape, or form. And Roland Emmerich, because he doesn't really give a crap what you think, made a sequel to this 20 years later because everyone was cramming for a sequel for Independence Day 20 years later. Not really, but they made it anyway because fuck you. I mean, that's pretty much the reason why. But yeah, that movie's terrible too, by the way. Independence Day Resurgence is absolutely abysmal. Like, no one was really asked for that. It was just basically a retread of this movie, which was already in and of itself a retread. It's just like, it's amazing that people consider this to be the new generation Star Wars. Like, you know what? Star Wars was a great film. The original Star Wars over almost 20 years ago, because they had great characters, they had a great story, they had great action. You got the action here, but the story and the characters are not that great in this movie. I'm sorry to tell you that, but then again, I'm part of a small group that thinks this way. A lot of people really like this movie. A lot of people consider it a classic. And like I said, we live in a country where freedom of speech is where we have freedom of speech. So go ahead and say what you want about to. And I have the freedom to say that I hate this movie. And I'm going to be one of those few people that says I don't really like it. And people are inclined to either agree with me or disagree on it. But that's the power of free speech. But yeah, I really don't like this movie. That's the bottom line I want to say here. That I really do not like this movie. It's just a really bad movie. It's got great visuals to it, some good action, but at the same time, it's just not fun. It's not a fun movie on any level, shape, or form, at least to me. But again, that's just my own personal opinion on it. I know it has a fan base, so what do I have to say? What else can I add to this one? So, but yeah, that's Independence Day, and that's one of the two movies that we have here. Only one other company was bold enough to actually put another film out there, and that was, of course, Disney, and that is John Travolta in Phenomenon. I mean, going up against Independence Day, this film still made over $100 million here in America, and it was a gigantic hit. I mean, It only cost $32 million, and it brought in $152 million worldwide, including the $100 million here. But yeah, it found an audience here, and it's an idea that sounds very intriguing. Like you have a story about John Travolta as this guy who suddenly gets turned into this genius with telekinetic powers. I mean, it's a concept that could be pretty interesting, and the movie does a pretty good job with it. I think it does a very good job making you question how is he doing this? How can he be the same person when he has this magic gift to him? I mean, in some areas, this could be considered the beginning of a villain origin story. I mean, that's pretty much what that trailer kind of sets it up to be, but it's never really anything like that. And I think the first maybe 2/3 of the movie, I think really is the strongest part. It kind of drops the ball at the end of the film. I feel like it takes a kind of predictable route we kind of expect to see coming, and I think maybe there could have been something really more had they done something a little bit more different, or came up with a little bit more of a question of a way that the audience can really figure it out for themselves. You don't have to have it spelled out for you, but the movie kind of basically spells it out for you when it's all said and done. And I think that was maybe the wrong decision to go with this type of a film. The performances overall are really good. You got John Travolta doing a good job here, Kira Sedgwick as his love interest, Forrest Whitaker, Robert Duvall, a really good cast overall here. Brett Spiner is in this again. He was also in Independence Day, needless to say, in a much more sane role compared to what he was in Independence Day. But I digress. Let's be honest. The real reason this movie, I think, really stands with people is because of the Eric Clapton song "Change the World," which it's a really damn good song. I was just listening to it again before I recorded this, and that song still holds up after all these years. You can see why it's had the longevity that it has had. So, yeah, it's a great song. The score by Thomas Newman is very good, too. I mean, the movie isn't terrible. I would say I enjoyed it for the most part. I just wish that the end of the film was did something a little bit more creative instead of just going for the routine ending. I mean, it should have been an ending where you make the judgment for yourself. It should be ambiguous, is what I'm trying to say here. Like, you should be able to look at the situation here and make your own judgment of what the story should end like. And it doesn't really do that. It feels like a film that it starts off really strong and then kind of tapers off a lot towards the end of the film. Not a bad film per se. I'd say I like it more than the stuff that I really didn't like about it. It's a decent film. It's a decent film. I'd recommend checking it out, especially if you want to see a good John Travolta performance post Pulp Fiction. This is one of his stronger ones. I really enjoyed it because of that. All I wish is that the ending was a little bit more ambiguous it makes you decide which way the story should go instead of going for the obvious way. But again, that's just my personal opinion on it. So that's Phenomenon. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll look at Denzel Washington in Courage Under Fire. We also have Nickelodeon's first feature film, Harriet the Spy, and also The Visitors. So we'll have 3 movies to look at on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.